Good morning, good evening or night, depending when you're watching this video. My name is Alegende and welcome back to World of Tanks and the Look Back series, where we now take a look back at Recon. So, the Recon game mode is a returning game mode where you can test out new developed maps. This testing ground for these new maps is not on the test server or the super test server, but immediately available on the live servers in a separate game mode. When you have played enough battles on one particular map, you can fill in a survey to give points of improvement for that map. I will prematurely say that this is the best way to implement such big new features to the game. Generally, wargaming has done this before with other separate game modes like the 100-year tank anniversary, which introduced wheeled vehicles, but I think maps are such a big and important part of the game that it far surpasses all other features. Especially since the HD update in 1.0. And on top of that, the World of Tanks player base are very thirsty for new map content. Because also after the 1.0 update, we lost 6 more maps after a gradual removal of maps beforehand. Although we have currently got 38 live maps in the random queue, more than we ever had before, but after this many years it still feels like a little amount, also because of some tier restrictions for some maps. So players are currently very much in need of new map content, which in my opinion is more important than new tanks or new mechanics, because it gives you a completely new environment with different scenarios, if it is developed properly, to test out your current vehicles with the current mechanics. But with that general overview out of the way, let's dive deeper in this game mode. So back in 2021, at the first iteration, this game mode didn't have a great start. Although the matchmaker itself was fine on paper with tier 8 to 10, limited SPGs and the same number of light tanks, wheeled vehicles and SPGs in every team. Even some premium tanks were stated as having their regular preferential matchmaking. But that was stated for a reason. Because at the start of this game mode, tanks with preferential matchmaking were put into +2 battles against tier 10. And because of that, wargaming outright cancelled the whole game mode for over a month at least. I remember this clearly, of finally getting such a new interesting game mode, and they fucked it a bit up and it's completely gone. For a reason that I didn't really think was that important, since back then many statistics weren't being tracked in those recon battles. But luckily we did have this game mode after all, and it didn't have any more matchmaking issues ever since. So let's talk about the big boys, the new maps themselves. In general, I think that the overall gameplay quality of these new maps were above average of the maps we have in the game so far. Of course, because of their novelty, I cannot 100% say that they are outright better, because in time some meta strategies can be observed more clearly, which might degrade this quality feature. But still, for the times that I played, I felt that you have on the most maps more approaches you can make in order to engage the enemy. We see this back in more easily disengageable positions, in which you can decide that you might be more impactful on a other part of this flank or a completely different flank, relocating towards that without risking taking too much fire from your relocation, and that you don't have to invest an enormous amount of time in order to relocate and re-engage enemies from a different angle or a different flank. Far East especially has this element with that central tunnel that connect the map flanks. Even though you can get caught out more since the enemies can do the same thing due to the general symmetrical layout of these maps. But I prefer this more than the continuous generic engagement on one flank from one angle. Speaking of one flank, even when you are forced to only engage one flank, the general experience on that flank is in most of the maps more dynamic. On Air Shipyard you have this elevated platform on the same flank, and on Outpost you have more sub-flanks within one flank on the map corners. This is exactly how maps should be designed. You maybe have 2 or 3, well, or more, maybe that could also be interesting, more of these main flanks between tank types, but within that flank there are multiple possibilities to engage on more of these sub-flanks. A short distance means that even heavy tanks have an easier time to observe the situation and try out a different corner for their approach. I also noticed that most of the maps had more of a second front before you can take control of the capture zone. This front line in the back was especially noticeable on maps like Foothills, Oyster Bay and Kloostertal. Personally, I like this element to be present at maps, even though in practice I haven't noticed much use of it, because most of the times battles are already decided when the engagement is reaching those locations. This can be somewhat countered by reducing the amount of turbo battles we have these days, but that's a whole other issue to resolve. Because in the end, when I did use these locations, I found it a very great experience to be during a last stand situation. So based on these important traits, I made a personal ranking based on my personal opinions and my observations for all of the Recon maps so far. I might be able to make a longer video going more in depth on my analysis of these maps, so let me know if you want that. But in short, here is my ranking for the latest version of all the 12 Recon maps. At number 12 we got Palace of Powers, which was definitely the worst map of them all, because this was the most campy map that was the hardest to make advances on. And when you did, from the south it was very easy to take over the capture zone, easily turning the game in your favor. At number 11 we got Volga, a more generic map that needs a lot of improvement on the right flank. A more dynamic hill works far better, like the one we see in Far East. At number 10 we have Aquilia. This map does have some good backline areas, but it's only pushable from the city. But that approach can also easily be stopped by camping tanks. All other flanks will be pretty much a stalemate unless there aren't any vehicles on one particular side. At number 9 we have Canyon, which has a good middle area but lackluster flanks in the corners, with the corner in the lower left of the map being especially nightmarish for heavies even after the rework. At number 8 we got Anikievka. This map has some imbalances on the flanks and has too big of an open area in the middle of the city. Also the caps are far too easy to defend from the city once again. At number 7 we got Kloostertal. It has some great flanks on the left and the backs of the map, but the middle part has far too many fire angles, which makes advancing very difficult and quite annoying. At number 6 we got Avalanche. It's quite open but yet covered. You have multiple flanks and relocating possibilities at almost all points during your advances on this map. At number 5 we got Outpost, a overall decent map but still got one way up the mountain, which ain't a very good thing if you look at maps like mines, which can easily decide the winning outcome for whoever takes the hill. Speaking of hills, at number 4 we got foothills. Great areas in the back and multiple outflanking possibilities. Only a little bit of off balance with the one team getting more arty cover. At number 3 we got Air Shipyard, which has made vast improvements in the second version with still an excellent designed left flank. At number 2 we got Far East. Has the most possibilities to make changes in engagement on the map at large and still has large enough area for heavy tanks to do this on a lower scale. And at number 1 it's Oyster Bay. In my opinion the best map on performance, on easy reflanking, dynamic flanks and last stand locations. I think mainly due to the unique, diverse and generally covered terrain. Another very important element of this game mode is the ability to give your feedback on the design of these maps. Without this feedback, this game mode would already be quite enjoyable and would give wargaming enough hard data on movements, battle duration and general balance. But adding an extra survey feature excels this game mode to be a truly testing ground with a high value on the more soft data. In other words, the player's feelings of these maps. This makes Recon the most player-orientated game mode ever, since it will actively pave the way on how these maps will be implemented, or if they are going to be implemented in the first place. We never seen this extensive amount of feedback collection before for a particular part of the game. But like many other things in World of Tanks, is this feedback actually contributing towards any change? So of the 12 maps so far, we have seen 4 of them being reworked. Canyon, Far East, Air Shipyard and Outpost, which we now have in the random battle queue. So let's start off with Canyon. I personally don't really understand why this map has been given another chance to be pushed through, since the corridors on the map corners are kind of lame. But looking at the changes in the last iteration, we see some actual improvements. More cover in the middle of the map makes this location more safe and usable for light and medium tanks. We got opposite rocks on the medium flank corner instead of a central high ground, which was kind of risky to take. But unfortunately not a lot of improvement on the heavy tank corner, which makes that particular part of the map the most lackluster. On Far East we see many great reworks, especially at the airstrip with more cover and some extra entry points towards the tunnel. Also some rebalances in the town make this part more comfortable to play. The only thing I would also change as well is the strong light tank position in the bush line on both sides, where the light tanks can spot almost everyone going up the hill at those specific points with these rocks, which is kind of a risky spot to drive by. Air Shipyard saw the most changes, with the biggest one being a full redo of the entire right side of the map, which was definitely needed. Also changes towards the middle and the back of the map were also good, and the best flank, the left flank, which was already fine, didn't get touched. Then the map Outpost, which was rated the best map of them all. In my opinion there were better ones, but I'm glad Oyster Bay got second place and will appear in 2023. As far as Outpost goes, there were more small changes for better navigation, travel time and overpowered crossfires. But I had gladly seen multiple routes up to the central mountain. On the points where you have the lookouts towards the bases were also traversable upwards, but with a huge increase in time due to a very steep slope. But in general, it seems that wargaming really listens to the feedback of players. Maybe not all of the improvement points are getting through, but most of the important ones are. This gives me a lot more trust in the future of map development. Now, also do this with tanks, equipment and crew, maybe? Although that might be a bit more tedious, I presume. Before we wrap up this video, I want to mention that this game mode also gave out some neat rewards in the form of reserves, directives, camo and premium account. Also, the survey itself got a nice rework this year and looks more user-friendly with better ways to exactly point out locations where improvements are needed. So, Recon mode, and other great game mode with a very good method of implementing future content. It is novel, enjoyable, and best of all, you can help along designing the future of World of Tanks. Truly an excellent game mode, which I suggest all of you at least try out and change World of Tanks for the better. So with that, that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it and I will see you next time. Laters!